Welcome to We Love That For You, a wedding podcast with personality, perspective, and plenty of heart. We are Chris and Jackie from Limelight Entertainment, and we're here to help you plan your best day ever without the stress. Welcome back to another episode of We Love That For You. In our last episode, we talked about the vendor chemistry, and we revisited a moment where it really mattered. Today, we're going to take that same energy and help our listeners pick the photographer who's actually right for them. Let's talk about the questions couples should be asking, but usually don't think about asking.
All right, got it. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions since you are the true professional here. Okay? So when couples meet a photographer, what's the first thing they should be paying attention to in terms of style?
The first thing they should be paying attention to in terms of style when thinking about a photographer is how they would like to visualize or how they would like to see their wedding photos in 5, 10, 20 years from now. So there is a variety of photography styles out there, and I think it's really important to, while trends are fun, think about how trendy you want your wedding photos to be when you look back on them in 20 years. So, do you want that classic style? Do you want something that's different and trendy? And when you look back on it, you're like, oh, that was so fun. It really is a personal preference. And like I've stated in other episodes before, it's very important to look on a photographer's portfolio, look at their Instagram, and ask for full wedding galleries and ensure that they're covering the day and that you can visualize yourself in these photos. And that's really what I think is, what couples should pay attention to the most when it comes to style. Excellent.
So it's pretty important. It sounds pretty important, but how important is it for a photographer's style to match the couple's vision?
I mean, as I just said, I think it's super important. If you hire a professional, they're going to give you photos that should be very consistent with the style that they represent in their portfolio. So your vision should match their portfolio. And if your vision matches their portfolio, you'll know exactly what to expect. When you receive your full wedding day gallery, there will be no unmet expectations. There will be no ultra disappointments in there, There have been big online controversies in the past of, people going on TikTok. It was a whole thing about, I think they called her the Sepia Bride or Sepia Gate or something like that, where this bride hired a wedding photographer who had a very brown toned edit to their photography. And then when they got their wedding photos back, were incredibly disappointed. And then we're asking that photographer to change her editing style to match her vision. So at the end of the day, I think your vision, the couple's vision, should match the photographer's style. And then there will be no disappointment and no unmet expectations. And you won't have to want to reach out to your photographer and ask them to change their entire editing style. Make sure that their portfolio matches that vision from the start.
Yeah, absolutely. And not just I would say don't just look at their, one photography page on the website. No. Ask to look through multiple portfolios and
dive deep.
And make sure that there's consistency in all of these galleries.
Yeah. Oh, consistency is huge. Dive deep. I mean, I've even seen on websites where you have one is kind of like a filmy edit, and then the next one's like a bright and airy edit. And then in my head, if I were the consumer, well, what am I getting on my wedding day? Mm-hmm. Am I getting a filmy edit? Am I getting a bright and airy edit? What am I getting? So. You're right. Dive deep into full wedding galleries, portfolios, and make sure that they can consistently capture photos in all lighting situations and edit them all for that consistency.
Perfect. Excellent. So some key questions for couples. Number one, how would you describe your shooting style and editing style?
Yeah, that's definitely something you want to ask a potential photographer right off the bat is, You want to figure out what their shooting style is, what their editing style is, and they should be able to answer that confidently for you. So,
absolutely. Number 2, do you give direction or keep things candid?
yeah, I love this question. I love when people ask me this question because there is a huge boom of like really fluid, movement-based photography, candid photography, which is really fun and really beautiful. But can your photographer also handle your traditional post photos from mom, for dad, for grandma? Can they handle a family formalist? Can they dictate it well? Can they get through it quickly? I mean, these are all super, super important questions. So, being able to give direction, but also capture the candids is very important. And that just is a great question to ask, is if they give direction, if they capture candids, if they can balance both, and do they represent that in their portfolio?
Perfect. Question number 3 that you should ask your photographer. How do you handle tight timelines or unexpected changes?
Great question. That's a great question. Timelines, unexpected changes. It's the name of the game when it comes to a wedding. So asking that of your photographer and knowing how they prepare themselves for your wedding day is super important.
Gotcha. Next question, you should ask your photographer, how many weddings do you shoot per year?
Yeah, it's a good question too. It just really, it gives you a good idea of like their volume, how they handle their volume, if they have a team, and then also how much attention they're going to give to you, as an individual couple, as an individual wedding. So
Absolutely. So just really quick, out of curiosity, like what's the difference between a wedding photographer that shoots maybe 15 weddings per year versus a wedding photographer that shoots 75 weddings per year?
it completely depends on their systems. It completely depends on their processes. I know of photographers who shoot 15 weddings a year, and it still takes 8 to 12 weeks to get their wedding photos done, or if not more. It could be a 4-month turnaround time, and they only shoot 15 to 20. Maybe they do that in their spare time. Or you've got somebody who shoots 75 a year, but they have their systems in place, and they have they can handle that volume and turnaround time as far as editing goes. Whether that means that they have a private editor for their 75 a year, whether that means that they are just really good at being able to concentrate attention on each individual wedding. We're up there, but we have different people in different places to maintain that level of hospitality, that level of consistency. We have our editors in place. We have myself, who is in charge of all the timelines and in charge of all the client communication. We have our assistants. So we're able to handle that kind of volume, but still also make sure that our couples are getting the attention that they deserve. So that is a loaded question, and you're just going to have to ask the photographer, like if they do give you a high number, your follow-up question is, how do you handle that level of volume?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or if they give you a low number, you need to ask them, well, do you do this full time or do you do this on the side? Are you working Monday to Friday? Because if they're working Monday to Friday, how much time are they spending on editing your photos on Saturday and Sunday? Or at like 11 o'clock at night when they have to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning the next day? So that could be why a person who takes 15 weddings a year has a 4 or 5 month turnaround time for their wedding gallery. I mean, this brings you just back to the consistency of edits. It brings you back to the consistency of a business. Check their reviews, feel confident in them.
Yeah, absolutely.
I could go on and on.
So that's a great question for any of our listeners to ask, because it could really give you a lot of, insight on what delivery times might look like. After the wedding.
Yeah.
So So yeah, you don't want to be waiting around 8 months for your wedding photos.
Heck no. Check your contracts, ask that question, but that's in this list of questions to ask your photographer is delivery times. But yeah.
Cool. So last question would be, have you worked at our venue?
That's a great question to ask your photographer. And it's great. It's a great question to ask, and it's really nice if they have worked at your venue before. However, keep in mind that a trusted photographer, a real professional, can walk into any lighting situation in any space and be able to create. So,
cool.
Yeah, that's a good question to ask. So the next few questions are related to teamwork and communication. So we've seen firsthand how a photographer's communication can make or break a wedding day, and what we think couples should be watching out for. So in this list of questions, we want to go through and make sure that your teamwork, your communication amongst your photographers and amongst vendors, is fluid and that they're able to work together as a team.
So what does good teamwork between a photographer and other vendors look like?
Like stated in a previous episode, best example of good teamwork amongst photographers and vendors is introducing themselves, talking about the plan for the day, talking about the timeline, and just really making sure that everybody's on the same page. Again, so that each individual vendor can shine, and that each individual vendor can ensure that they're creating the best possible wedding day for their couple.
Cool.
Yeah. So questions that you should ask your photographer based on teamwork, communication. Number one would be, what does communication look like leading up to the wedding day? Super important to ask your photographer. You want to know, am I going to hear from you before the wedding day? How many times am I going to hear from you? You don't want to just ghost your client. You don't want to book them and then just fall off until a couple weeks before the wedding day. So it's really important to ask your potential photographer, what does communication look like throughout my planning process with you? I like that question. I'm an over communicator, so it's possible one could find my emails a little too much, but I think that it's important to over communicate things. It's like, why would I want to leave you in the dark? And why would I want to leave you feeling unconfident in me, or our team?
Well, the more you communicate with your client, the more they're ensured that, they're being taken care of.
Absolutely.
They're not, sitting up at night saying, hey.
Haven't heard from them.
Yeah.
Where are they?
Exactly.
Are they going to show up?
Exactly. So another question that you should ask your photographer is, how do you coordinate / work with other vendors?
Great example, or a great question to ask are your potential photographer, especially if you're planning to hire a videography team or a content creation team, especially those two particular vendors, because you're spending the most time with them. Usually we don't get to the DJ aspect of it until cocktail hour, reception. It's usually only a couple hours. But you are coordinating heavily with your photo team, with your videography team and your content creation team. And depending on the venue and depending on where they get ready, you may also be coordinating heavily with a maitre d' or a bridal attendant. There's a bunch of venues in New Jersey that we work at that, you can spend the whole day getting ready there, going right up until first look, and your bridal attendant is working and communicating also with your photography team. So, asking that question is important because you want to make sure that your photographer works well with others and that they are able to coordinate with them to, make it a great day.
All right. So I love this question because right now I'm thinking of a story that you were telling me one time about how you work seamlessly with our video team, right? Because when you pose for video, you need to have motion in mind, right? So why don't you give us an example of how you work with our video team?
Yeah.
This way you don't have to pose a couple twice for the same moment.
Yeah, well, yeah, you don't want to have to pose a couple twice for the same moment. Sometimes it does happen, but When it comes to working in tandem, photo, video, I do know that video prefers flow and prefers motion. And I like those shots because they help me to be a little bit more creative, step a little bit more outside of, the whole traditional pose and grab a little bit more of like a candid feel and a prompted photo while also creating a flow and a motion shot for our videography team. So I do really like working in tandem with video. Sometimes I'll let them pose the couple and I'll shoot through whatever they're doing and vice versa. So it just creates a lot more variety in the end result, in the final gallery. And it creates a lot more variety throughout their highlight films and their, all their video deliverables from us.
Cool. Yeah, it's a great example. Thank you.
Yeah.
So next question would be, what do you need from us for the best photos?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question to ask your photographer. What do you need from us for the best photos? I like questions when I'm speaking to a potential couple. I love good questions, and I love questions that are kind of not the normal, like, what equipment do you use? So this is a great question to ask your photographer because it really gives the photographer a chance to give you an honest answer about like what it is particularly that they need from the couple to create the best photos. For me, I just need you to trust us. Trust us. Let us be the professionals. Trust us and be in the moment and don't overthink things. Because when you start to try to control your photographer, control the list, control the day, then nothing is organically happening. Nothing's organically happening and nothing is organically being captured. And then what? You're looking back at your photos and being like, that was posed, that was posed, that was posed, that was faked, and that was reenacted. And none of it's natural. So, that's how I would answer that question. But I think that's a really great question to ask your photographer.
Yeah, first thing that comes to my mind is maybe not a wedding day, but an engagement shoot, like outfit choice.
Oh, yeah, that's a great question or a great answer to that question.
Yeah, outfit choice, colors, color palettes.
Yeah.
Make sure everything looks good together on camera.
I mean, yeah, you definitely want to look good. So that's a great
looks
question.
good together. I mean,
yeah.
I'm sure you've been in situations where a couple was wearing clashing colors.
Interesting choices, I call them. Interesting choices, But listen, these are their photos, so
they are.
But if they really want my honest opinion, that's a great question to ask. What do you need from us for the best photos?
Exactly.
So
cool.
And if anything, I need you to read your guide. Like, just read your guide.
Yeah.
And honestly, it answers all of your questions. So if you read your guide, you're gonna know exactly what we need to. But I love that question for an interview too.
Definitely. Last question would be, how do you handle things running behind?
Yeah, it's a good question for your photographer. You want to know how they're going to handle an oopsie, they're running behind and time, like makeup is running behind or transportation is running behind, whatever the case may be. Asking your photographer how they're going to handle that is very important. It's something that you want to know. You want to know that they're going to be able to pivot, swap things around. If they've created a great timeline with some cushion like we do, that really doesn't affect us. I really can't tell you in any situation where we've been behind for ceremony, where we've ran out of time to get all the photos that they were wanting or all the traditional photos that we always capture, because of that cushion timeline. But there have been situations where we've run behind and we just pivot around. We swap things, we figure it out, and we make it happen. But asking your photographer how they handle it is really a great question. Okay, next topic, technical prep and backup plans.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, this is where your story from the last episode is going to come into play. How can couples find out whether a photographer is actually prepared? So these questions are going to set them up for, finding out how prepared a photographer is for backup plans and things like that. So thinking about your story from last episode, what is a photo red flag that couples shouldn't ignore?
A photo red flag
Like
that
just
couples-
one.
Gotcha. Single photographers.
Going out by yourself.
Going out by yourself, that could be really
Yeah.
tough. And also, if they're not bringing backup equipment, how many cameras are they how many cameras do they have on themselves at all times throughout the day? Because if it's only one camera, what if there's some technical difficulties with that camera? Either there's going to be a huge delay in capturing the day, or that camera may just malfunction for the rest of the day, and now you're out photos.
Yeah, like what if there's one camera? I mean, I know of photographers who will shoot with one camera actively, but they always have a backup in their bag. But I would really hope. But anyway, one photographer is also a little risky as well.
Absolutely.
I don't know. That's just a
Because what happens if
opinion-based.
that one photographer gets sick also that day?
Car accident,
Now you have nobody.
so many different things.
Yeah.
I love that we only go out with 2 photographers and an assistant, and our assistants are always a photographer in training, so they are all capable of taking photos, and that's 3 people. If you're placing all your eggs in one basket with one photographer, it's a little risky. But anyway, these are the questions that I would ask. These are the questions that I'm suggesting couples ask their potential photographers while they're interviewing them. First things first, what backup equipment do you bring? That should be important. Also, that's a question that should also be automatically answered on an FAQ page. But it is a great question if while you're having a conversation, it comes up in conversation with your potential photographer to ask.
Yeah, absolutely. Second question should be, how do you protect our images during the day?
That's a good question. It's a great question. Making sure that the photographer is shooting on a camera with 2 card slots is super important. I'm also not a huge fan of large memory cards. I don't mind changing my memory card a few times a day, just because then at least I have a few different memory cards. I'm not putting all my eggs into one basket, but camera equipment should have dual card slots, photographing and recording on 2 cards, and then I'm usually backing up those cards during reception. So it's as soon as formalities are over, I'm backing up everything we shot from earlier on in the day on a hard drive.
Yep.
So, but
Cool.
it's a very great question to ask.
Next question to ask, I think we kind of already answered this
Yeah.
already, but it would be, what happens if your gear fails?
Yeah, I mean, backpedaling to what we said before, like if your gear fails, you should have backup gear.
Yeah, it's very simple.
But not everybody goes out, especially the hobbyists or the newly beginning professionals.
Next question would be, how do you handle difficult lighting?
Oh, I love that question.
I know you love this question.
I
so
love that question.
tell our listeners about how you handle difficult lighting.
I'm big on lighting. I love going in a room and analyzing the room and analyzing how to light the room. So, and that's something that we're always talking about amongst the team. So like I'm talking about that with my second photographers. And I know my lead photographers that go out do the same thing. But being able to go into a room or a space or wherever you're taking photos and reading the light and making the light work for you. If it doesn't work for you, bringing in your flashes, bringing in your artificial light, making that light work for you. But it's a great question to ask your photographer because not everyone is well skilled or can handle artificial light or is knowledgeable in artificial light. There's a lot of photographers that are natural light only. And I think that's very risky because venues give you different lighting situations. Certain times of the day, certain times of the year, certain seasons give you different lighting situations. And being able to walk into any space and feel confident in your technical skill is important. So, being a natural light only photographer or interviewing natural light only photographers is a little risky just because you have no idea. What do you do when you walk into a barn that's really dark? It's just candlelit, So just being able to walk into any space and handle difficult lighting is I think is super beneficial trait to have of your photographer.
Excellent. Next question. Do you bring extra batteries, memory cards? I mean, seems like a no-brainer, right?
This is a repeat question, I feel like.
Yeah, we kind of...
This is backup equipment.
Yeah, this is basically backup equipment.
Yeah, this is backup equipment.
Anyone hiring a friend, which I've heard before, they definitely need to ask this question.
I would definitely ask this question. Yeah. I don't know. I'm in some photography groups where I've seen left the house, only have one battery. Is anyone in the area with an extra battery? And I'm like, wait,
really?
What? Yes, I swear. My bag has 11 camera batteries. I have 2 cameras and then a backup camera that never gets touched. And I carry 11 camera batteries. 11. So, I don't know. I mean, I guess it happens, accidents happen, but, it just goes back to backup equipment, making sure you have enough of everything. I don't even know how many memory cards we have. It's endless.
There's a lot.
They are $15 to $20 a memory card. If I'm running low, so something I do with our memory cards is if we shot your wedding, I put your memory cards in a little tackle box and I label it with your name and your date on it. And I don't touch those memory cards until your wedding gets delivered. So sometimes in the height of the season, we have a lot of memory cards in my little tackle box that are just sitting there and cannot be touched. So I'll just go online, go to B&H, order 15 more $15 memory cards and stock them up. So I think we've got a really good amount of memory cards.
Cool. So, all right, next let's talk about deliverables and expectations. So deliverables would be when you're delivering the photo galleries, when you are delivering your albums, all your tangible products and all of that.
Yeah.
So basically, the questions here are what should couples expect when it comes to delivery timelines?
Yeah, that's a good question to ask your photographer, not to circle back to the beginning of this conversation where we're talking about, how many weddings a year they do. But, knowing that delivery timeline is really important. So asking if you can expect them in 6 weeks, if you can expect them in 8 to 10 weeks, what the delivery time is something you want to know. So you're not just sitting around waiting or wondering or emailing and asking.
What's a delivery time couples should be expecting?
It varies. It really does vary based on the photographer, But, we're at about 6 weeks, and I know other professionals are at about 8. Some are at about 4. It really just depends on the photographer. It depends on, how much attention they're giving each individual photo and, what the quality control is. If you're getting a gallery back in a week and a half, it depends, are you getting a consistent gallery? Can you say that gallery is consistent from start to finish? 8 weeks is fair also, especially if you're talking to somebody who does 50, 60, 70 weddings a year. So, and also ask them if they're giving you any sneak peeks, what are they offering you to hold you over?
Mm-hmm.
In my opinion, anywhere from 6 to 12 weeks is totally fair. That's totally fair. I like to err on the side of 6 weeks because I know how excited a couple is to get their photos back.
Yeah.
But 12 weeks is totally fair also, especially if you're, like I said, if that's just your turnaround time, if that's what your clientele is used to, but once we're getting past 12 weeks, I think it's a little long.
I wouldn't want to see it going past 12 weeks. I mean,
it's a little long.
You lose the excitement at that point.
It's gone.
Right?
Yeah. I mean,
the wedding was 3 months ago.
Hopefully you're getting sneak peeks if your delivery time is past 12.
Yeah.
But, I've heard of situations where it was 5, 6 months. Now, to me, that's a video turnaround time. That's a fair video turnaround time. But 6 months for photos is wild to me.
Yeah.
Wild.
Cool.
Yeah. That's a good question. Make sure you ask that question to your photographer. Like, what's your delivery timeline?
All right. Now, I was just going to kind of dive into the key questions that our listeners should be asking
Yeah,
photographers.
yeah.
So first question would be, again, this goes back to questions about deliverables and expectations. So first question should be, how many images do we get?
Yeah, it's a great question to ask too. Like, again, right now, what we're doing is helping couples out by giving them questions to ask to set the right expectations. So
Exactly.
set your expectations and then hire your photographer based on those expectations.
Exactly.
So how many images do we get is a great question. Are you the type of person who wants 2,500 photos and you've got a set of 20 of them and they're all about a similar pose but tiny little slight differences in each? Do you want that many photos, or are you the type of person who wants a nice, beautifully curated gallery of like 700 to 900 photos of the best photos? Mm-hmm. You in the best light of each best moment. Ask yourself what type of couple or what type of client you are, and then ask your photographer, how many images do we get? And can you elaborate on the types of images we're going to get? Like if it's, like I said, a larger number, a lot of similar poses, a lower number, curated, beautiful, unique images throughout the entire gallery.
Absolutely. Cool. And then next question to ask your photographer would be, what's your turnaround time?
Yeah, ask that. We already discussed that.
We already talked about this.
Ask your photographer that. Know ahead of time.
Next question would be, do you offer sneak peeks?
Ask them if you get sneak peeks, especially. That's a great follow-up question too. What's your turnaround time? So in that particular order, what's your turnaround time? Do we get sneak peeks? And, like I said, if their delivery time is like the longer end of 12 weeks, sneak peeks are great because you have that. And ask about how many to expect. Some people give 10, some people give 50.
Yeah, that's what I was curious about. What should our listeners be expecting when it comes to, how many sneak peeks do you deliver?
Yeah, that's an individual photography, or an individual photographer's personal preference or, business model,
Sure.
So I like to touch on a little bit of everything, so we'll, do like a couple from ceremony, a couple from portrait time, like maybe one or two of wedding party, like just a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
When it's my own wedding, I think it's when anyone who shoots here, I'll go through and find like some pretty epic ones, and I'll make sure I make those a sneak peek too. So
absolutely,
those really wow ones.
So next question would be, do you store or back up images after?
Immediately, like I just said, we're backing up photos. I'm backing up photos at reception. They're being backed up immediately. So.
Yeah, but how many photographers just go home and just leave the photos on their memory cards and probably don't even back them up right away, right? So that's an honest question. That's a really good question that you should be asking your photographer.
I guess too, like this question can be asked in a different way as well. So how do you store or back up your images? So for example, we store, like I said earlier, in the memory cards go in a tackle box. Mm-hmm. And then the images, like anything from the memory card, is then stored in the cloud and then on a hard drive and then on my, I always say this wrong, my NAS. The NAS.
The NAS.
The NAS. I don't know. I don't even know what it stands for, but I've got a tech guy who takes care of my backup anyway.
We got him.
So they're backed up in 3 different ways and they're stored in 3 different ways. And then when the images are delivered, I never set galleries to expire. So that's a backup for me. I always encourage our couples to back up again. So that question can be asked. It's a great question for our couples to ask a potential photographer, and it could be answered in a couple different ways.
Cool. So last question when it comes to deliverables and expectations would be what's included in retouching.
Yeah, it's a good question to ask to set that expectation. What are you expecting from your photographer? Are you expecting, blemish removal, or are you expecting body shaping? So it's something you should know ahead of time. Check the contract as well. We do not body shape here, so we are focused on exposure, color correction, and light retouching. And then anything else is additional, of course. But we're always aiming to put you in great light so that we don't have to retouch anything anyway. So we're thinking about posing, we're thinking about lighting, we're trying to be ahead of that anyway.
Perfect.
But ask your photographer so that you are not expecting something to happen and then it doesn't, and then you're disappointed. Next is personality fit. So you want to make sure that your photographer and you and your personalities mesh well. You want this person is going to be with you for 9 to 10 hours on a day. You want to make sure that they can bring you the calm. You want to make sure that they have compassion and empathy and that they don't have ego and that their personality meets your personality. So, that I think is a huge thing. So, this is definitely something that could potentially be overlooked, and the reason personality matters is you don't want somebody coming in and really kind of disrupting your day. Maybe they have great photos. Maybe their portfolio wowed you, but maybe they walk in like a diva, or kind of like a dictator where they're like, just like, you there, you do this. Like,
yeah, they kind of make it stiff and
yeah,
like uncomfortable.
Or just
not fun.
I feel like we have less and less of this in the industry now, but I feel like 10, 15 years ago, it was not to say anything about the men, but a lot of men have this stigma when they go out that they're just like, huh, either they're kind of like they've been in the industry for a while and they're just, their photos are like award winning and this and that. And if you don't do what they say in order to get that photo, then, forget you. So like they kind of come in with this like ego and this attitude, like, you got to listen to me. And if you don't listen to me, you're forget about your photos. Like, I don't know. To me, I'm just very encouraging. I'm very like, you look great. This is wonderful. I don't care if we're running behind. I'll make it work. I'll figure it out. I don't care if the videographer steps in my space or needs you for a minute. I'll figure it out. Like, I'm very like go with the flow and easy to work with. And so is the rest of our team. And I think that I feel like there have just been stories. I've heard stories of other couples or other photographers working with other photographers or videographers that walk in and are just, their energy is just abrupt and demanding. Yeah. I think that's the best way to describe it. Their energy is just abrupt and demanding. They rub the bridesmaids the wrong way, which is huge. Why would you want to upset the bride's best friends? Like,
I think that whole go with the flow mentality also helps make the couples and the wedding party feel more comfortable in front of the camera, which is great.
Yeah.
In the end for the results.
Right. You don't want to feel uncomfortable. So a personality on a wedding day is huge. You want somebody who's just kind and, relaxed and easy to work with.
Mm-hmm.
Is not in their ego. I think the ego is the biggest problem. When you got somebody in there with their ego, they kind of don't care how difficult they're making the day for everyone else.
Which is a shame.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's definitely a shame. So personality, long story short.
Long story short. What are the key questions
Personality
couples should be asking about personality?
Yeah.
What's your ideal couple?
Yeah, ask the photographer. That's a great question. I honestly have never been asked that.
How does a photographer have an ideal couple?
I mean, I would just ask the question and see how the photographer answers it.
Yeah.
That's what I would do, because, my ideal couple wouldn't have anything to do with anything other than their energy, their attitude, and their, the it's so hard to describe, like, just the way that they go with the flow. So, like, I'm a go with the flow flexible person. I want to make sure that I work with people who are also go with the flow flexible people. I mean, you should want what you want and you should get what you want on your wedding day, so don't get me wrong there. Like, take a stand for the things that you want, but, like, just be kind, be in love,
Yeah.
be adaptable.
Yeah.
Those are my ideal couples.
Yeah, 'cause
Kind, in love,
If
adaptable.
the photographer answers that question kind of weird, it's like, all right, dude, I
But-
don't know about this.
Yeah, like, I mean, that's how I would genuinely answer that question. Like, but if you trip somebody up, like, you can kind of tell,
Yeah.
Even if you're on a phone call, I mean, if you're on a virtual call with them, you can really tell.
Oh, yeah.
They'll probably be squirming in their seat.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're on a phone call with them and you ask them, hey, what's your ideal couple? And, like, they're like, 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 they I don't know, maybe they just aren't the right one for you.
You're done.
You want
All
to
right.
feel good about their answer to that question. That's a great question.
Next, what do you love about photographing weddings? That's a great question to ask a photographer.
Yeah, that's a good general question.
Yeah.
I mean,
And then lastly, how do you help us feel comfortable?
Yeah.
I think that's a really good question that you should be asking a photographer,
yeah.
especially if you're not used to being in front of a camera, in those professional environments.
Yeah. Yeah, these are great questions that'll really get you a good read on their energy and a good read on their personality and if you're going to jive with their personality.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Red flags.
Red flags.
We're going to run through this really quickly. Red flags that you should be looking out for when you are interviewing photographers. One, vague about their backup equipment. We've been talking about that all day. So if they can't honest you quickly and if they can't answer you honestly and quickly, that's a red flag. And then slow and dishonest communication.
Mm-hmm.
They leave you hanging. They're slow to answer you back. And their communication to you doesn't feel honest. That's a red flag. There's no contract. If there's no contract, you are running in the other direction. Please do not do that. Like, do not do that.
Who's doing that? That's crazy.
Hobbyists.
All right.
I mean, I've seen it. I've seen it in groups. I know they'll even preface the post. I know I should have contracted, but we didn't have a contract. It happens.
That's
it just
wild.
happens. But don't do it. That's a red flag. An inconsistent portfolio where every image has a different color or a tone or a filtered look to it. If you are looking through a portfolio and you can easily distinguish that each photo in that portfolio was either photographed by a completely different photographer or was in different lighting and had to be edited differently to handle that lighting situation, that's a red flag. Inconsistent portfolio. And if you want me to take a look at a portfolio that you're interested in, and I'll let you know if it's consistent or not, I will. Overly edited images that are unnatural, red flag. Unless that's your style. If that's your style to have an overly edited image that looks unnatural, go for it. But for us here, we want classic, timeless. And then talks poorly about other vendors. That's a huge red flag. If they're talking smack about other companies and other vendors, run. And they don't listen to you. So that's the final one. If they don't listen to you, it's a huge red flag. You want someone who's going to hear you and not talk over you. Do you want to go through the green flags or do you want me to?
Green flags. All right, cool. So these are green flags that make you instantly trust a photographer.
Yeah.
The quick list is backup gear for everything, clear and consistent communication and check-ins, consistent work amongst their portfolio. They ask thoughtful questions. They really want to know more about you and understand your vision, and then take that vision and bring it to life and put it into the portfolio. They're team-oriented.
Yes.
And confident, calm, and organized.
Confident and calm.
Those are all green flags. Pro tips for couples. All right. So I'm going to ask, if you could give couples one tip to save them stress, what would it be?
If I could give one tip to a couple to save them stress, I would say to, again, to not have to keep pedaling backwards to the beginning of the conversation, but make sure that you feel good with your photographer and your photography team. Just feel like you can trust them, and if you can feel like you trust your photography team, then you are in great hands. Like, that kind of relieves a lot of other stress.
And then, why is looking at full galleries such a game changer versus just looking at someone's website?
You can look at a portfolio or a website, and then what are you getting from that? You're getting their best of the best. But being able to scan a full wedding day is going to show you how they handle every lighting situation, every different part of the day, every different venue. And it just gives you a good, full view of, or expectation on what you can get or what you will get by hiring them.
Yeah, and professional photographers that will share full galleries openly
are confident
in their work.
Confident in their consistency.
And they're consistent.
So, I think that it's a game changer. Make sure that they're not hesitating to send you a full gallery or more.
Yeah.
Not
Absolutely.
Just one. Show me them all. And if you have a team, let me show you a bunch from each photographer on our team.
Perfect. All right, let's do a quick recap.
All right, quick recap on the episode. When hiring your wedding photographer, one, always ask to see full galleries. Look at their full galleries, not just their Instagram and portfolio. Two, choose someone you feel comfortable around, you can spend the entire day with. Three, ask them if they are going to help you with timeline planning. This is very important. It just helps relieve a lot of stress on the wedding day. 4, make sure that their editing style matches your long-term vision. And then 5, look for consistency in all lighting scenarios. Make sure that they can handle all the lighting scenarios, and do that by checking their full galleries. And remember, wherever you're planning and whatever you're dreaming, we love that for you. We're looking forward to seeing you next time. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. If this episode was helpful, make sure you follow or subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. We love hearing from you, so if you have a question, a planning struggle, or an episode idea, email me at jackie@limelihtentertainmentnj.com. There's a really good chance your question becomes a future episode. And if you're planning a New Jersey wedding and want vendors who truly care, you can find us at limelightwedding.com. And remember, wherever you're planning and whatever you're dreaming, we love that for you.